Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, we've heard a lot about the advent of 5G, and I haven't really spoken a great deal about it in length on the show, but it's about time I address that. And I met a very interesting man some months ago down in Dorset, Devon? I think it was Dorset.
It was in Shaftesbury, wasn't it?
It was in Shaftesbury. There we are. You can hear him in the background. His name is Jarvis. He tells me he's had a computing degree in 1976 when I was still at a secondary school, and 30 years in the industry. But he also says perhaps not the most latest geek. However, he is on the warpath of 5G. Jarvis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Richard. Nice to see you in virtual.
In virtual, yes, because
Yeah,
we've done it the other way around. I often meet people
yeah,
firstly on Zoom and then in real life, and then I don't recognise them.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
We've done it the other way around, haven't we? That's right. Yes.
absolutely. So I enjoy your. I've seen your presentation a couple of times now about 5G and the worries that we should have, and the radiation and the effects of that. And of course, I've spoken to a number of people who are talking about various different ways of dealing with the radiation itself. But if we didn't have the towers in the first place, we wouldn't actually have that problem. So, Ian, let's talk a little bit about 5G then. Why is it a problem? People think of mobile phones being able to download data at rapid speed is going to help them, well, goodness knows how, watch videos in the space of seconds or download them in the space of seconds. It's progression, isn't it?
It is in some respects, and you're right. Although you can download, you may be able to. Let's put it that way. May be able to download a video in a few seconds or half a minute or whatever, but you still got to watch it in 90 minutes.
True.
Where is the advantage in that on a human level? And it may be useful. I'm told that in America, the very high frequencies that they're advertising and saying, there's millimeter waves. You've heard that
Mm.
phrase, I guess. Millimeter waves, very high speed, fast response time, all those things, masses and masses of data. At the moment, it's being used in sports stadiums in the States. And I'm told that they can watch 10 different screens on their mobile phone all at the same time. Whether they actually spend time watching the play on the field,
Well,
I've
it does
no
seem a bit
idea
bizarre, doesn't it? If you're there and you're all watching on 10 different screens.
Yeah, I think if I owned a football club or something in this country, I would ban the use of mobile phones in the
Uh,
stadium.
absolutely.
So please concentrate on the game in progress, not the replays or the anything like that. But so those millimeter waves right at that very top frequency range. It's a range of oh, the numbers don't matter. The numbers don't matter. They really.
Mm.
And that's one. There's none of that, so far as I'm aware, in the UK. I think it's being tested in one or two places, possibly within a factory site. But most of the facilities that supplies, most people like you or I don't actually need.
Mm.
We come down to the lower frequencies because one difference with 5G between all the other Gs before, G incidentally, for those who are not aware, stands for generation. Not to be
Right.
confused with a big G, a big H, and a small z, which is gigahertz, which is actually the frequency itself.
Yes.
So it can be a little bit confusing when you come across it at first. But the difference, one of the differences with 5G is it's not limited to a restricted range of frequencies as are 4G and 3G before it. So it can overlap those frequencies. So 5G can use the same frequencies that 4G is using in a technical sense. Okay, I'm not talking in a political or organizational sense, in a
Right.
technical sense. So it has a range from right down at the bottom, right up to what they define as 300 gigahertz. Now, that is an unimaginable speed for anybody to imagine. And I don't even know if it's ever been tried anywhere in the world, to be honest, at that frequency. but the
And
frequencies
presumably, it needs
below.
a lot of power as well to sort of push those sort of levels of frequency out.
Well, that's an interesting point because I was chatting with Barry Trower in a car park a little while ago, and I asked him specifically how far would a signal go, and he said, "Well, in theory, it will keep on going forever if nothing gets in the way."
Right.
So, and that doesn't necessarily need a huge greater power to send that out. It's if you like other things that make the danger. And one of the things that we are not really talking enough about is that it's additive. You know, they're not, they okay, they're going to take away 3G.
Mm.
But that'll just mean that the people using 3G phones will just start using the 4G phone. So it's not going to reduce anything. So we've still got 2G phones, we've still got 4G phones, and now we're introducing what I generally refer to as 5G enabled phones. Whether they can actually receive currently a genuine only 5G signal is a debatable issue. What I read in some of the technical papers, and as you said, I'm not the latest tech geek, the grey beard gives it away a little bit, um, is they're using 4G and 3G together.
Right. Okay.
And they create what they call, and this is the big difference, one of the big differences, what they call a collimated beam. It's actually a parallel beam. I'm trying to hold my hands.
Yes. Yes.
So it's not focused like this. It's actually a parallel beam. And I did have one professor of physics mentioning this when I was doing a talk down in Devon. And she said, you know, yes, it has to. You may need to make it clear that it is a parallel beam. It's a different thing to a focus. Like you can't focus it like you focus a torch.
Right.
Um, and that is
So more like a laser then.
more like a laser. Yes,
Right.
yes, yes. She did say it's not like a laser, but it's more like a laser if you're
Right.
in the sort of terms that you and I would discuss it, you know, over a pint, for
So
example.
it's, yeah. So it's sort of going in a straight line, but not as you say narrowed down to a point
Exactly.
because it's kind of already just one
Yeah, yeah.
point.
And the technology is quite clever. It uses the multiple antennas, multiple signals, and puts them in phase and out of phase. An electronics guy I know was trying to explain it to me, um, not far from where you live, actually, in Worthing, and that's basically what it does. And so those beams can actually be aimed at individual mobile phones or any other thing that it's sending a signal to, which makes it very difficult to know where they are at any one time in your street, for example. 4G,
Right.
4G, 3G, 2G were rather like radio and TV. They sort of beam out in every direction. It's not beam. Drop that word beam. They radiate
Radiate.
out. You know, same effect as dropping a stone in a still pond. An image I
Yeah.
often use. Um, and so yes, and they go out in concentric circles, but in three dimensions, of course. So it's just concentric spheres, if you like. They go out like
Yeah.
this.
And am I right in thinking that the 5G version you need more of them
Yeah,
to cover the same ground?
yes, yeah. They'll be putting more antennas up in order to because of that beaming technology. They say don't take me too much down that actual tech thing,
Mm.
because I shall get lost and
Yeah.
just like you.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
suppose the worry is, and whilst this may be technically fantastic that they can
Mm.
do all of this, the worry that people have is what it does to us because we know radiation can be not a very good thing.
That's right. I mean, it is different from nuclear radiation in the sense, but yes, and we have known this since the probably the 1930s actually. Um, going back, I mean, there was a Professor Beard who noticed that there was a strange new disease coming in the late 1800s with the telegraph and the electricity. But it really became noticed with telephone exchanges when the workers in the telephone exchanges were getting unwell. in a particular way, in similar symptoms. And the workers then sort of realized that's what was affecting them. But the scientists and doctors were too intelligent to notice it. So that's still true today, probably.
I
But
think you're right.
in 1973, the US Navy Research Department published a list of 2,300 papers, um, all of which showed biological effects on not necessarily humans, but on twigs and animals and rats, so on. But that was 1973. So, and that same year there was a conference in Warsaw about it, and so since then, there's going to be a lot of research that has been done uh, still on it. And does it harm us? Well, think of your microwave oven.
Mm.
That's one good example to use. It heats up food because it jiggles the water molecules there. Now, we, as most people know, have lots of water molecules in our physical biology. So, is that what it's doing? Because we are now using 2.4 gigahertz in the public space, beaming out from both 4G and 5G masts. So that has to be a question that if we use it for that microwave oven, which was originally called a radar range, incidentally,
Oh, was it a radar
was a
range?
radar range. But it didn't sell because people
No,
told me not to like that.
no, especially in the sort of nuclear age that we'd sort of come in.
Yes.
You can see why radar range is perhaps not the best choice of terms. But
Yeah.
microwave, of course, we're very acutely aware of what they do,
Mm.
and it's interesting because these things come on. The lay public have no concept unless they've studied radio
Mm.
technology and radiation, etc. And then these, as you just so rightly said, they're in the public space, and we don't get a choice. If you're
No.
walking in the public space or it's pointing towards your house, we don't get a choice whether we live in this soup of radiation
Yeah,
or not.
electrosmog is the term that is often used for that. You're absolutely
Right.
right, and it does bring up that issue of the precautionary principle, which scientists talk about quite a lot. Um, and one of the myths around that is that you need the same level of scientific evidence to make a political or an ethical decision as you need to prove a particular thing in science. That's a myth. You don't need that. I like to talk sometimes about swans
Mm,
because if we go back a few centuries, we all in the UK we would have thought a definition of a swan includes the fact that it's white.
right.
So if I go to Australia, for example, and find that there are actually swans that are black, I don't have to bring all of them back in order to
No,
prove to the people in England. It's enough just to bring one back and
that's
say,
yes.
well, this is a swan by every other thing, except it's not white, it's black. So that knocks the theory that all swans are white. And the same is true with looking at the precautionary principle. If I can show you just one case where there is sufficient evidence to conclude scientifically that the radiation EMF frequencies have caused some harmful or any, in fact, biological effects, that's enough
Yes.
to take a political or an ethical decision. And even if the effect it shows is a positive effect, if it can have a positive effect or no effect, it is illogical to think that it cannot have a negative effect.
Yes.
So you can still take the same political decision that precaution is wise. And I suppose I don't need to give you all the examples such as smoking, even thalidomide, asbestos. We all know those.
The list is endless, isn't it?
Yeah, it
But
is.
even if it's a positive effect, I suppose it would be nice to be asked whether you want it or not.
Absolutely. Isn't that one
You,
of the rules of medical experiments? Yeah,
yeah, we've all been told it's good for you, but it's like, well, let me be the judge of whether I want it. Thank you for the option,
yes.
but I'd like to choose it. So we do have this, and of course, a lot of people are worried, and there's a lot of strange stories about the power of this 5G,
Yes.
and it's difficult to know what's true and what's not true, of course. But again, it still comes back to this idea that it wouldn't it be nice to have these things, and
Mm,
yet we have seen these towers or these, and they're smaller boxes, aren't they, than
they
the
are, yes,
the
yes.
the, the other ones? It's
Yeah,
because
the tall
sometimes
ones that look like the stereo speakers I used to have in my home years ago after
yes,
4G,
back in the
3G.
good old days.
Good old days. And the square boxes ones, the square looking ones um, are, as you say, the 5G ones, yes. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, and so the point I was, well, it's all again about personal choice, but they seem to be coming on stream, whether they're used to their maximum degree, as you said earlier, or not, or whether they're being in conjunction. But as people are worried, and they would like to know, I mean, the companies that are putting them in sort of blanketly saying, "Oh, well, it's safe. Don't worry about it." It's that sort of safe and effective phraseology that has had a slight tinge to it these days, where I'm not quite sure I know what it means anymore, and for whom it's safe and effective, if you see what I mean.
yeah.
So, is there things that people can do if they just say, if there's enough people and they said, I don't want one in my street?
Well, there is in fact because most of the masts, so the new ground-based masts, the new masts particularly, have to have some form of planning application. And we're not all familiar with the planning system. I certainly wasn't 3 years ago,
No.
but we know it exists, and we know that if somebody was to put an extension at the back of their house which impinged on your air or your vision or something, you could actually write a letter to the council and complain about it. Object to it is the legal term, or simply comment on it. Say,
Mm.
yes, it's beautiful. I think it should go there. And the same is true with these masts that are going up in the streets and on fields and around the place. Yes, they do need that planning application. It's not quite straightforward because there is something that I usually refer to as a fast track system. Officially, it's called prior approval. So the telecom companies have to apply for either a full planning application or a prior approval. Now, something that we discovered very recently in the last month or so um, is that in order to apply for that, you have to be on a register that is held by Ofcom.
Right.
So if you are not on that register, you should not be able to apply for it. And if you do apply for it erroneously, then they should refuse the fast track system, the prior approval, and say do it by a full planning application. Now, one of the advantages of doing it by the fast track system is that objections can be done on open quotes, sighting and visibility, close quotes. Okay. Um, and the councils do not encourage anybody to object on health grounds. Okay.
Which is a bit odd, isn't it?
Which is a bit odd. Yes. Yes. It certainly is. Now, in
They
terms
don't.
of,
So just to emphasise that point, because that's a bit strange,
yeah,
having just spent a few minutes talking about radiation and people know if they go and have an X-ray, they're told you shouldn't have too many of them,
yes.
and being exposed to radiation on a daily basis probably not wise, and yet the councils, they persuade you not to
Yeah.
object to it on health grounds, which might be your number one reason.
Yeah, it may well be, and it certainly is with a lot of people.
Mm,
What they Now, let's step back just a little bit to
mm.
make this as clear as I possibly can. Back in the 90s, an organization called the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, right,
Okay.
which we call ICNIRP, ICNIRP, for convenience. Yeah, it's not the most easy word to say, is it? Um, and they created what they called a guideline that is designed, according to the document itself, to protect humans. Doesn't mention anybody else. It doesn't mention animals. It doesn't mention birds, bees, the environment, fields of wheat, or anything like that. And which wouldn't matter if somebody else was looking at that, but nobody
Right.
is. Nobody is. So they say it's for the protection of humans. Now, that is the document that the government has said to councils that they can use a certificate um, that says it's compliant in order to avoid anybody arguing about health. Now, that raises another question because the certificate is not issued by ICNIRP, it's issued by the applicating company itself. So if I was a company called Three, for example,
Mm.
I'm not talking about legal names, I'm just talking about chatty names that you and I might use.
Mm.
And then that they could say, write a certificate themselves that says this equipment is going to be compliant. Okay. Now, there's an obvious conflict of interest in that.
Well, you might be completely incompetent for one thing, and you wiring this thing up saying it's perfectly safe,
Mm,
and it may blast, a hole in
yeah.
someone's head for all we know.
I mean, we do like to think that the telecom companies themselves have some competence in the
Mm.
technology which they're rolling out. So let's give them a bit of a break.
Well,
You know?
okay, but I mean,
But
presumably
I take your point. Yeah,
there's
if I wrote
there's some
a certificate
public,
saying I'm a surgeon, would
yes,
you accept it from me? No, you wouldn't.
right, but I mean they must have some public liability or some insurance that connects that together, so that if
Yeah,
somebody gets
again,
radio,
that's a very interesting question because one of the companies, and this was we were talking earlier about a letter that I sent out to lots of people recently for sharing, and it raised sort of that point because some of the companies that we know are applying for this fast track system are not on that register.
right?
So they
So
shouldn't be
shouldn't
given
be doing.
that fast track ability. They call it general permitted development order is the government name for that says they can do that.
Mm.
Um, and interestingly enough, one of the particular companies, after that letter went out, and some people started using it and putting it into their council, on the last update of the Ofcom register, that company is now on the register.
Oh, right.
So, so they've obviously acknowledged that what they were doing before is incorrect
Yes.
and wrong because they were very quickly, companies don't usually do that with one sentence in a letter. They would usually struggle. They usually argue about it. Say, no, we're right. They didn't. Went straight onto that register. I find that quite interesting. Again, I will say I'm not a lawyer, but that strikes me as some sort of an acknowledgement that, hey guys, you actually got it right this time. Um, but it doesn't validate past applications from that company. It only means that they have the right to apply for it from
Yes.
the 4th of October.
So the fact that they've done them in the past erroneously,
Yeah.
as you say, doesn't validate that. I mean, they and presumably they don't get to have to go back and then say, well, let's get the planning permission for those ones we've done in the past, and if they're wrong, we take them down.
Yeah. Well, that's what we should be doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if that is the case, and and what they've done is wrong. I'm not saying illegal at the moment. I just don't know. I'm
Mm.
raising the question. I'm opening Pandora's box to see what's inside there. Um, if that is the case, and that was done wrongly,
Mm.
and that means the mast went up without the proper process being followed, that mast could be up there illegal in our streets,
Mm.
and it could be many, many masts, of course. Um, and and what would happen if I can issue a claim of it's actually affected me? What if it
Mm.
even in a physical sense fell down on somebody?
Well, exactly. And the thing is, I mean, we see it with just ordinary planning.
Mm.
If you put a shed up and you're not supposed to, and you know, or you people build houses and then they've been told, sorry, mate, you've got to take it down, and they do have to take it down retrospectively.
Yes.
So if that's the system, then it should also apply
Right.
to masts that have been put up uh, even by mistake or misunderstood or
Mm.
whatever. They should come down because, as you say, if it just physically falls on you or the box drops off.
Well,
Uh,
interestingly enough, a bus did run into one in Coventry a few weeks, not that long ago, maybe a couple of months ago. It was reported in the Coventry local news, um, and we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with that in a legal sense. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. The bus had it may have been on a way back to the garage or something, as it was empty just with the driver. Fortunately, it wasn't a driverless bus. So, um,
so it's
so yeah,
interesting.
it raises lots of questions, Richard. And we're
Absolutely.
putting these questions. I've sent this letter out. That's just point one, if you like. I've sent
Hmm.
this letter out around lots of people, contacts that I know, and asked them to ask the same questions in the same format to their own local councils and see what they getting back in terms of responses. So I'm waiting for a response from Wolverhampton. I've not received one yet. Uh,
So, I mean, what comes across is that this is incredibly reasonable what you're doing. This isn't sort of scaremongering, going, "Oh, we mustn't have it, we won't have it, we don't want it," and rah rah rah, and big protests and all of that. From what you've described, you're just sort of asking questions. Actually, should
mm,
they be there? Are they safe? What's what's the happens if they shouldn't be there, etc., etc.
yes, yes,
But as more and more people are worried, and they may just say, look, these are our public roads. I don't really want to be radiated. I don't need this service. Maybe in an industrial estate where
mm,
you've got big business, and perhaps they need it. But in my just ordinary Victorian terraced street here,
yes.
really and truly, most people have got fibre coming into their house
Mm.
or reasonably fast internet. Why do I need that extra 5G mobile technology?
Yeah, I mean, most of us really don't want that at all. The millimeter waves, the waves that are low frequency, are a little bit faster than 4G. I couldn't define exactly how fast, but the other thing about them is they go a long way.
Right.
And I have a paper from Nokia, which I read some months ago now, which actually says, open quotes, we can service thousands of customers over hundreds of square miles with just one 5G tower,
Gosh.
which is
But
not what they're telling us about, and because that applies to the millimeter waves, which we're not using at the moment.
right.
And what they will be used for, as you rightly say, in factories and things, it'll be for robotics and related artificial intelligence systems that go with that. Do we want that
Yes.
in our streets?
Well, and
What is
and
it going? What could it be used for in our streets? I,
yes.
a question.
Exactly. And is it not true that they're having to remove trees and those obstacles in
Mm.
the way because of the beams? So
That's
if
yeah,
we've
yes.
seen these avenues of trees that have been
Mm.
removed so that they can put these towers in. Um,
Well, yes, that I mean, certainly the millimeter waves, again, going up to that high frequency stuff, above 24 gigahertz, let's say, can get blocked. It does get blocked by trees, by buildings. And even if the tree leaves get wet, it can attenuate, it can affect the signals that's going there. At the low frequencies, that's not the case.
right.
Again, this Nokia paper says, if I can remember the quote, says, "Oh, the low frequency or the low band, as they refer it, does make it easier to penetrate walls and windows." That's the phraseology. Does make it easier, which suggests that that's what they're trying to do.
Yes.
And so that isn't similarly affected by trees and the like. If if we want any of it at all, that would be the frequency range that most of us people, for our mobile phones, normal use stuff, would be quite happy with, and that would work for us. So that doesn't get blocked.
Yes.
And there was a case in Solihull a year or so ago where a telecom company applied to chop off the top of a tree in order to get the signal out more easily. Solihull took a very imaginative step and put a preservation order on the tree so that they couldn't come back and ask for it to be lowered anymore. I thought that was quite
Mm.
wise for the planning department and the tree preservation. And certainly there are effects with trees. There's been research again of trees placed near towers. This is talking about 4G, 3 towers, so many
Mm.
years ago as well, um, that have shown a degradation in its growth over a period of 10 or 15 years. And one of the we have a tree officer in Wolverhampton, and he made a really good comment. This was I'd only just started on this trail then, and he objected to a mast because it would have damaged the roots whilst it was being constructed I think it was an ancient beech or an old beech tree or something.
Right.
And he objected in the strongest of terms about them putting a mast out, and it was actually refused. So I was very grateful for that tree officer teaching me that particular aspect of it, which I honestly had not considered up till then. Uh,
Yes,
but
and you said earlier that this particular document said that it was safe just for humans, and so
mm,
we don't really know what it does for other things such as wildlife, or indeed, I suppose, animals that we eat.
yes,
If it's over going past farmland and things like
mm,
that, pigs and cows and what have you, and chickens.
yeah,
Um,
that's a very interesting point because they also make lots of exclusion even to people. So if
right.
you've got any metal in your body, such as a cochlear implant, um, operation bits of in your spine, neck, knees, or anything like that, even dental amalgam
I was
or
going to say, yeah.
braces, yeah, you're excluded.
Right.
And if
So,
you actually think of a list, if you try and list all the things that people might have in their bodies as medical, including
yeah,
piercings, of course,
including
piercings,
piercings, of course, and earrings and rings and jewelry that's all metal on you,
yes,
and
yeah,
zips. I mean, when you think
some
of
of that
zips,
would affect you, yes.
and
Um,
bras have metal things. I understand.
They
Not that I
do.
wear
Metal
one, but
underwiring, they can act as an aerial as well. And
yeah.
contraceptive coil is copper. So they can all they can all do that. So, I did I think you were there when in the Glastonbury Symposium on
Yes.
that last day when I spoke there. I don't know if you were in the auditorium when I was speaking. I did a little survey around. There were about 200 or so people in the audience. And
Oh, yes. I remember. Yeah.
yeah, at the end of going through those, only a half a dozen things, there was one woman who said, "No, I've got no metal in my body at all," and that's one out of 200. So
Yeah.
the other 199 are not covered by this guideline,
Which
and
is
yet
which is a nonsense. Yeah.
the government says this is what you use to judge it. So
So, so clearly, before people put up these things, there needs to be a radical look at this technology.
mm,
It seems that progression is we're progressing because just because we can, we want to,
absolutely, absolutely,
and the health benefit. And of course, we don't know what 20, 30 years of living in that electric fog, is going to be like for us.
mm.
Like so many things, it may not affect us today, but what about 5, 10, 15 years down the line?
You're spot on, Richard, there. Erica Mallory Blythe has said in the past, we have not yet had a generation going from natural birth to natural death in this level of radiation. And she said that some years ago.
Wow. I mean,
So,
just mobile phones on 2 or 3G is
well,
something
yeah.
we.
I
We
think
don't.
4G was really when it became a bit more serious, and a lot
Mm,
of the evidence that naturalists bring out for it affecting animals in the wild began about that time when 4G was first put in. There's a couple of well known to those who study it, of course,
mm,
um, reports on a reserve in Mount Nardi, which is in southern Australia. And also, there's been a report about insects on the island of Samos, which is a fairly pristine island. And they both focus on when 4G came in and noted those effects. It's more difficult, of course, to notice when something goes missing than when
yes.
something suddenly appears. Uh,
Right.
so,
Yes.
so sometimes these reports are done a few years later, uh, rather than slap bang at the time, because you don't know it's going to happen. And you can only find these things out in retrospect, can't you?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen so much folly by rushing things through.
Mm.
Pesticides, for example,
Mm.
is wiping out so many of the insects, and people are beginning to think a bit twice about the amount of pesticides that they put on crops and things. But that's over sort of 80 years.
Mm.
So to rush into things like 5G towers because we have the technology, and wouldn't it be great to download some data super quick, may not be such a good thing until we've found out the health benefits. So, what can people do? Because presumably there will be people, a lot of people, who are worried about this and will be thinking, well, can I go to the council and say, no, thank you, don't want it?
Yeah, yes, they can do. The biggest stumbling block is that most people, most of the time, don't go and read every day or every week even the current planning applications.
Right,
It's they go up on the council's website. There's supposed to be some consultation. Sometimes it is done perfectly, and sometimes it's done rather inadequately. One notice in the street on the opposite side of the road is not consultation by my definition.
right.
um, and they tend to put them on lampposts um, when there's a bus stop there where people gather and would be more likely to see it and read it. So why don't they put it in the bus stop? A nice
Mm.
big A3 thing saying, "Hey, um, there are so many ways that could be done better."
Well,
Most
these
people
days, I
haven't.
mean, I was sorry to interrupt there. I was just thinking there's these digital advertising TVs now in bus stops and things that are, selling products left, right, and centre.
Mm.
Presumably, the council have put them there. They could, if they were really serving the community, put in a notice up there so that you could go, oh, what's
Yeah,
this? We're thinking of
yeah.
doing that. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting point because around the inner ring road in Wolverhampton here, we've got several of those cameras, and occasionally they say, uh, "Be careful of cyclists," or "Don't drink and drive," or "It's Pride Month," or something like that. Yeah, that's an interesting point, Richard. I hadn't thought
It's
about
like, well, I thought
that.
you were working for us. Then you can tell us the
Yeah,
goodies that
yeah,
you want, and we
yeah.
can tell you if we like
Yeah.
them.
So the sad thing is we have to go on to the government website,
Hmm.
the council website, and look for the applications each week. And the people I've spoken with around the country uh, are doing that in many many groups. Coventry is doing it. Aberdeen, they're doing it now, and so on. Um, but if you don't have that knowledge, then you can't do it. I have put up on our website, stand up, I'll say this slowly for everybody, standupwolverhampton.com. There's a little 25-minute video I made of how they can do that.
Here we go.
Um,
I've got
yeah,
your.
that's it. That's the one. Yes. And if you scroll down, there's a whole series of videos actually and documents that are can help people if they're looking to um, deal with the planning applications. There are other sites as well, but this site I got with my colleagues in Wolverhampton, and it is going to be just about the planning applications and the way you can get around and argue to those. That one was a talk that I gave in Totnes earlier this year, um, and oh, that's the one I gave a possibly to you in Shaftesbury, I think. Yeah,
Ah, yes,
Shaftesbury.
demonstrating there the folly of holding a mobile phone so close to your head,
Mm.
and
Yes.
the exposure, etc. Yeah, I mean, it was, and because I was there, I was able to take it all in
Mm.
as you were doing it. I mean, it's a frightening thing, if we misuse some of this technology. Technology is great.
Mm.
I'm not knocking it because I'm
Absolutely.
using
Yeah.
it here and now, and I'm
You're
able
right.
to sort of cut between all the cameras and stuff. But if we don't know the dangers, then it can be folly.
Mm. Bearing in mind that the estimates, current estimates and proposed estimates are that 80% of the use of Wi-Fi, general term, is in downloading or streaming videos,
Yes.
entertainment, and social media. Do we really want to risk basically life on the planet for a faster download? I'm sorry, but I don't. Um,
No.
yeah,
No.
and
I think people could have a bit more patience.
yeah, and we are talking only about one aspect of it at the moment.
Mm.
There are so many other things that are involved that we could go on, but people can go onto that website and that particular page. It's EMF and radio frequency radiation, I think is the title of
Yeah.
the page. Yeah, it's an obvious page anyway. Um,
And
and
you've got I mean, just to show, I'll just scroll back up here. Hang on, I'm not seeing it. Where is it? There it is. Let me just scroll back up to the top, because if we go to the front page, there you are. You've got all sorts of other
yeah,
goodies on there.
yeah, my colleagues are doing other work in this uh, where we seem to be hit by so many different things at the same time, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So
As you found
marvelous
with
stuff.
your interviews, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So now you have a letter
I do.
that you were keen for people to, a template letter for
Yes,
people if they wish to approach the council.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, to put in objections to a planning application, you can use all normal sorts of things. You don't need to be a scientist or anything. You can say it's going to be really ugly in the street. It's going to get in the way of the bike racks, the bus shelter, the waste bins. How am I going to push my twins in a pram to get into the supermarket? All those things really do work because planning
Mm.
officers, they're just normal people like you or I. Many of them trying to do a really good job. Let's give them credit for that. Um, so all those things work. One street it might be creating an utter clutter with everything else that's there in a high street, for example. Another one, it might be in a suburban place where there's houses are spaced out and long straight roads, and it's just an eyesore in the middle of it.
Yes.
So you need to be a little bit careful. There is a list of possible things you can use up on that website, on that page, and other websites as well. I've got some really good articles on them as well. One of the ones I know the guy who runs it, RF Info, is RFINFO. It's got lots and lots of articles on it as well. So that gives you more aspect of studying different aspects of the frequencies and so on. So that's useful.
And
Um,
is it numbers? If it numbers of people who,
yeah,
you
numbers
know,
numbers
to
do make a difference.
yeah, rather than just one or two, if 20, 30 people
Yeah,
write in with different, whether it's the same thing, it's an eyesore
yeah,
or it's a health hazard, whatever it is,
yeah.
it would have more influence if there's a larger number of people.
It does, generally speaking. I mean, it's not just a straight
It's
summation
not a straight answer, right?
because the councils around the country and even within the same city are really inconsistent.
Yeah,
Some friends of mine and colleagues up in Edinburgh, two recently, very recently, one was put in or was planned for a residential area in the suburbs of the city. It was refused. And yet there's another one being put in a residential area down by the docks in Edinburgh, where there are far more people living far closer to the mast, and that's been approved.
Right.
Now they refused. The first one was actually refused on the grounds of too close to residential homes.
Right.
And yet this in Leith, it is being approved where there's so many more because there's bigger flats. There's blocks of flats, so the number of people that are close to the mast in a block of flats is
Yes.
considerably more than 4 or 5 detached dwellings. So
So
there's
there's no rhyme
absolutely
and
no
reason.
consistency.
Yeah, that's very strange.
Mm. And
So
that's
I'm gonna.
true around the whole country as well.
Yes.
We have an example not that long ago where in the same week, Birmingham refused one because it was going to be in front of a hospice, and Wolverhampton approved one that was put right in front of a hospital. And they're both in West Midlands.
Yes. I mean, it would be helpful if you could understand the reasons that they
Hmm.
give for approval, so you could actually, as a lay person, you could go, oh, okay, I understand the reasons. So if I object to this one, I can see the same reasons that they would approve it are
Hmm.
there. So maybe there's one of those reasons I can object to.
Yeah, and that does work as well. We have
Right.
frequently used that idea in the past. Look at how your council refuses them, and
So,
use those reasons, those rationales as well. Yeah.
so I've got your letter here. I
Mm.
wanted to show that on the screen here, the action template, as you've called it.
Yes.
And just take us through briefly. Take us through it because I know you said there's instructions and then later on is the actual
Yeah.
letter itself. So how does it work?
Well, what I'm asking people to do is to basically take the letter, which is the second page, and send it to your council. Send it to your councillors, particularly your own ward councillors. Send it to every single councillor in the council if you can, if you know how to do that.
Yeah.
You can send it by on paper. You need to top and tail it with your own details, so as you would for writing a normal letter. So I would put Ian Jarvis at the top, etc., and underneath again, yours sincerely or whatever. I'm having because of that change I mentioned right at the beginning, where that company, Signal Infrastructure UK Limited, has suddenly put itself on the register.
On the register, yeah.
I need to change the letter, and I'm in the process of doing that right before we did that. Came on air today, so that'll be up in the next couple of days, and people will be able to download the whole thing
So
from
the
our
letter would be available on the Stand Up
on
Wolverhampton.
on,
I'll leave the
on
link in the description
yeah, and
anyway. And
in a few, it'll be there hopefully in a couple of days.
yeah, so we're recording this on the 10th
Yeah,
of October. So if you've come after the weekend, hopefully it'll be up.
it should be there. Yeah, yes. Hopefully John will get it up for me. I should finish writing it today. I've no.
Yeah. But you think it's a strong letter that
Well,
will
it raises some quite important points. I mean, the point about the companies not being on that register that I mentioned is a serious issue because it
yes,
renders those masts that have been done in that way as possibly illegal.
right.
I'm very cautious in my words,
Yes,
but
no, quite right.
deliberately. And then it raises 3 points, actually, the letter. The first is about the company. The second one is about the ICNIRP. You remember we mentioned that a little while ago.
Yes,
And again, it's about that self-certification. And again, some of the companies that have been put on that declaration, it's supposed to be a company declaration, but some of the companies don't exist.
ah,
Two,
that's
two of the companies that have been mentioned very commonly since 2015, when that company was dissolved, contain that company's name.
right.
So how
So
can they certify anything, Richard?
yes, well, if the company doesn't exist, it can't possibly do it. Can't
No.
possibly
So, so,
certify
so
things.
that and one of my colleagues is having an argument with his borough council at the moment over that. Um, and the council suggested, well, it doesn't really matter whose name is on the certificate. I cannot accept that. I really can't accept
Well,
that.
who do you hold to account then?
Well, exactly. You make exactly the right point, Richard. Yeah. So that's the second point
Yes.
that it makes. You know, you need to question those certificates more. And the third point is that, as I said to you earlier, 5G frequencies can go way, way higher. Now, if the mast is capable of that, the companies themselves have to apply for a license with Ofcom for the frequencies they can emit. Now that applies to radio broadcasting, TV broadcasting, everybody. They have to say, and the Ofcom will say, okay, you can use these frequencies, and
Right.
nothing outside it. Okay, because it might bring an aeroplane down, for example, because of
Yeah.
the altimeter. Uh, now, if they're putting up these 5G masts, so far as I'm aware, excuse me, nobody has a license at those higher millimeter wave levels, because partly because Ofcom has not released them yet. So if they're putting up a mast that is outside the range of the frequencies for which they hold a license, the question is that legitimate?
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that. I've just posed the question in the letter, um, hoping that the councillors and the planning officers are going to look at it, um, and answer the question for themselves.
Yes, because I suppose the possibility would be a rogue player could, if you've got a range which actually is not really useful to us,
Mm,
and a rogue player starts using those frequencies, which may or may not be dangerous, then it's like having a car that can go 200 miles an hour. You don't need a car to go at 200 miles. You might need them to go perhaps to 90, 100 or something in order so that it's more efficient at lower speeds. But we have a legal limit.
mm,
But if you have a car that can go 200 or 300, people will always be tempted to go to an area which is clearly unsafe and unnecessary
mm.
on a public road.
Yes.
And I suppose that's a similar sort of thing. And so perhaps those boxes going up don't need to be, what would you say, attenuated or whatever
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to those. And it would reassure people
Yeah.
that
Yes.
that it's not going to be used for any nefarious. I'm not suggesting it is, but it
So
limits.
they're not going to they're going to stick to their
Mm,
license, which
exactly.
gives them those frequencies that they can use.
Because how would you and I tell anyway?
We
You
wouldn't.
know,
We've
because
no
you
idea.
can't see
Yeah,
it.
we'd have no idea, Richard. We'd have
Yeah.
no idea. I mean, there are so many other things. You know, the fact that the 5G base station, as they're calling them now, the 5G base station uses huge amounts of electricity, up to something like 40, between 40 and 75 average domestic homes, each one.
Wow.
And you know, there's been papers written on that. There's a paper in French that did that work that out for the French government, and other people around the world have commented and observed and checked what the electricity usage is. And does that stack up with sustainability goals?
Well,
Um,
if you've got a move to move people to EV vehicles,
mm,
and people are being more persuaded to get rid of gas central heating, for example, onto electric, and then you've got that the amount of power that's going to be required in a street to power all these things is a bit far fetched, isn't it?
it is, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
It poses a
I'm
huge
glad you
question
said
there.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. You know, you think of how much it's going to need, and you know the council's got the planning department putting all these high consuming things, and the environmental protection department telling me I've got to put an extra pullover on instead of turning up my heating. You know, there's no joined up thinking in
No.
at all, is there?
So these are very simple questions, really,
Mm,
for a council to answer. It might be uncomfortable for them to
yes.
answer them, but I think people have the right to know
Mm,
if they're if they're effectively paying for these services or using them
mm,
with their
mm.
mobile phones or the council and all of that.
Yeah, and
You
I've raised that issue in almost every single objection I've written in the last 2 years, and not a single council has responded to it. It's one of those things that governments are very good at. They just ignore the bits they don't want to see, don't they?
Yes,
Yes.
it is very interesting. Well, I'm sure
So,
people will be fascinated
mm,
to download the letter when it's there,
yeah.
to look at your website and those videos that give us a bit more information on those
Mm,
presentations about what the benefits or not of 5G and whether we should be concerned. So thank you so much, Ian,
mm.
for
Can I
coming
just
on the
add
show.
one little thing, which is
Of course.
really for the future, I think, because some colleagues of mine have just put a submission together, a paper together. It's quite a complicated paper. It relates to something called the European Electronic Communications Code. And it's something that happened with the Brexit.
Mm,
This code was brought into UK law as part of that transition process and the withdrawal bill, um, and that actually does contain legal um, determinants for looking after health from radio frequency radiation. Now,
right.
at this stage, I'll just mention it, but
Mm,
that will be either accepted and taken forward into a court case as necessary. Um, but if that goes through, then the government should be changing a lot of the regulations, the guidelines, and even the law in order to cater for that. It's going to be a longish road, but if people are aware, I will be putting something up on that same website when I have the more details of it from those two people who are doing it. So it will give people an idea. Um, at the moment, I'm not using it as an objection or anything like that because it is so new. It was just laid um, to the government department, and I think it's 12th of September.
right.
So it's really just being at that early stage. But there is something else coming. That's really what I want people to know at the moment.
Well, that sounds optimistic.
Mm, yeah.
If people are concerned about their health and protecting it,
Yeah,
definitely.
and the thing I think I'd like to just finish off with is that there are lots of people around the country who are putting in objections, who are doing good work, and and there are also lots of councils, well, a few councils who are refusing them. Birmingham has got a good refusal rate, Bristol, Coventry, and people are beginning to engage more with their councils as well, and councillors. So the more we engage with our councils and agree that we're actually both on the same side. Uh,
Well, that's it.
yeah,
You would hope that we would be working in tandem to create the same nice environment that everybody wants
yeah,
and can agree upon.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Ian, it's been a joy to talk to you. No doubt our paths will cross in real life
I'm
again
sure they will again, Richard.
at
Yes,
some other thing. It's been fascinating to go on this journey and witness all these wonderful people doing and making people aware of curious things that are happening in the world.
mm,
So really appreciate that.
yeah,
I've since the talk that you did with me and you were showing the pictures of the towers. As I drive around, you see them. It's like when you buy a red car or something, you suddenly see every red car, don't you? And now these towers are leaping out at me, and you're going, crikey, there's a lot of them.
yes. I particularly notice them when I'm driving along motorways because we never used
Mm,
to have many along motorways, did they? So
no.
apart
These
from
smart motorways, I've noticed they have
yeah,
this weird cone and then a little box and
yeah,
then, another 20 yards or so, another cone on a
mm.
pole and then a box. And I wondered if that's for driverless cars or whatever the technology wants to be used for. But
I'm sure some of it is. The thing is, there's so many different little boxes going up around the place, small
yes,
stores and all sorts of things that it's almost impossible one to know. And also, um, there's I was looking at a Talensa document a little while last week, I think it was, which a friend sent me, and it is very proudly states, where you can have this sensor for listening to people walking down the street, for example. It's nobody will recognize what it is because it's disguised as a light detector for switching on and switching off the light. So they're disguising things, and you have to ask the question again: if something is being disguised,
Yes.
why?
Yeah. What possible reason could they wish to disguise something?
Yeah.
But a device that wants to listen to people.
Well, a lot. There are lots of sensors being put around the country.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
that those doorbells that people get.
Oh, yes.
Those
With the
so-called,
videos.
they're not doorbells. They're not doorbells, Richard. They're a surveillance system. It's a complete surveillance system in itself. It's videoing everything within. Well, it's audio recording anybody within 15 meters. It's videoing any that comes in the the range. There are questions about data protection, data privacy. If you're walking past on the pavement, are you being recorded? Where's the recording go? Because the app that you get with it says, I can give you a history. Do you want a history? So if you can give me a history,
It's obviously saved it.
it's storing the data.
Well,
So
I can assure people, anybody who goes past my house, my knocker, my brass knocker, is recording nothing. And you
yeah,
won't get a history out of that other than wear and tear, I'm afraid.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't like those things. I
yeah.
don't.
But
I
it just
avoid
shows
them.
how careful we need to be these days
We do.
about those sorts of things. I mean, we could go on all day about this.
We could. Ian, I hope people come if they see Ian Jarvis on a talk somewhere. Go and see him. It's a good laugh. You might come away a little bit more concerned about certain things, but it's all good fun. He puts it over incredibly well. I thoroughly enjoyed both of the presentations I saw.
Thank you, thank you.
It's been a joy to have you on the show. Go and have a look at Stand Up Wolverhampton. The link will be in the description, and in a few days that letter. And if you are worried about a certain 5G tower going up, send it to the council and see what happens. And let me know. Be interested to find out what the response is and what the success rate is, and I can pass that on to Ian as well.
Yeah, that would be grateful for that. Yeah, that would be really
Yeah, be
interesting.
very good.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Ian, thank you so much. Really enjoyed that. And viewers, thank you for watching. I'll be back with more commentary and wonderful interviewees. But until the next time, from Ian and I, thanks for watching and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.